Okay, who am I? Number 6. This could be a tough one. John Hinckley Jr. Okay, let's do some background on it. John Hinckley Jr. is out for day trips, you know. This is the guy who wounded and nearly killed President Ronald Reagan and 3 other men, is now allowed to take outside trips. Supervised, of course, by relatives and friends. His first stop was dinner with friends. In a 2-to-1 ruling, the U.S. Court of Appeals voted to give Hinckley some time out of prison. This is the system working, stated his attorney. He's not a prisoner, he's a patient. He's acquitted of attempt to murder and assassination of March 30th, 1981 of President Reagan. And what does that have to do with this guy? De Niro played this part in a movie called Taxi Driver. Travis Bickle. He was a taxi driver, he's a Vietnam veteran who had a hard time adjusting to his life back in the civilian world in New York. Through various kind of spurned romantic interludes with people, he had determined he was going to kill a senator. He was foiled in that plot, a candidate for senator. And now in comes Jodie Foster, and Jodie Foster played a young prostitute in this movie. She was about 14 or 15. And Travis Bickle fell in love with Jodie Foster as a prostitute and eventually went into the place where she was purveying her prostitution, into kind of this slum house, if you will, and killed the John and everyone associated with her victimization. Interesting movie, good movie. Now let's get back to the real world here. And in fact, there's President Reagan. You can see President Reagan waving as he was getting into the limousine after giving a speech. You can see his arm is up, and this is when he was shot, and the bullet entered around underneath his armpit with his. And you can see now the Secret Service is immediately on him in the second frame, shoving him into the car. This is what Secret Service does. Upon getting Reagan into the car speeds off. The Secret Service man, still laying on top of Reagan, now runs his hands all over Reagan's body as part of the procedure, finds blood, and they immediately race to the hospital where Reagan is found to, yes, have been shot, and the bullet is lodged dangerously close to his heart and his lung. Obviously, he survived. Now, he was convicted of the crime. He pled not guilty by reason of insanity. His plea was effective. So Hinckley is in a state mental hospital, successfully mounting the not guilty by reason of insanity plea. Right? Divided Appeals Court then cleared the way Friday for John Hinckley Jr. to make supervised day trips away from the mental hospital where he'd been confined since he tried to assassinate former President Reagan. The 2-to-1 ruling said the decision on such trips should be decided by the court, but should be up to the doctors treating Hinckley at Elizabeth's hospital. The ruling means that Hinckley, accompanied by the hospital personnel, may leave St. Elizabeth's for short visits with his family and friends. His doctors support letting Hinckley make visits as part of his gradual re-entry into society. And here comes the clincher. He's not a prisoner, he's a patient with a right to treatment. So what happens? He found not guilty by reason of insanity, put into a mental hospital, the treatment's successful. What do you do? Well, at some point, you likely need to be released because there's no legitimate reason to hold you at that point. So, it's a huge battle because this guy tried to assassinate the president. What's happening? Well, he's been treated, and he's been treated successfully. So now the tension is, can we actually let him out? And he is. So, but it goes back and forth, right? A federal judge ruled that Hinckley would be allowed visits supervised by his parents to their home outside Washington, D.C. Judge ruled that Hinckley should have up to 3 visits of 3 nights and then 4 visits of 4 nights, each depending on successful completion. You can go through the rest of these, but the idea is his disorder is in full remission. So, why did Hinckley do this? Well, he did it to impress Jodie Foster, supposedly. And that's how it got connected to the movie Taxi Driver, right? He shot Reagan to impress Foster. His doctor said his depression, psychosis are in full remission. And now he's been allowed more and more visits. As the defense attorneys and continued representation of Hinckley push for greater and greater privileges, the government pushes back. and now Hinckley is in fact out of the mental hospital. So as of now, the legal team representing Hinckley, 13 days of testimony in late 2011, 2012, they want to be released from representation of Hinckley because he isn't paying his bills and they're kind of stuck with it. So he spends 10 days a month. No, not anymore. He's been released, so he's now a permanent outpatient. Okay. He's released Saturday morning. Will live in Williamsburg, which he had multiple times for short trips. Okay. What will happen as part of his release? He can't talk to the press. He has to work 3 days a week. He has to be allowed to drive no more than 30 miles and see a psychiatrist twice a month. This, in fact, is just some photos of the aftermath of the shooting, if you want to go through those. I think this is especially, you can see the one Secret Service in the agent, Secret Service agent there holding his Uzi. These guys are serious, man. He produced that Uzi from underneath his coat. Yeah. Okay. And you can see the general mayhem as a result of this. So we're confronted with the fourth dilemma. What's crazy? What's not? And that's up to a jury ultimately to decide, at least within our system, based on the testimony. And we've seen, right, that the Bronner Rule and the McNaughton Rule still exist, designed to allow the jury some latitude in making this decision. And again, I'm going to say, I picked extreme examples to kind of push the envelope in this. Now, one more thing I want to say is I want to return to that term evil, because that's a problematic one for us. And when you know, we look at the fourth dilemma and we're saying, hey, what do the scientists say, the psychological scientists versus people in the legal business? Okay, but when we get to evil, you know, it's not, how does psychology deal with this concept of evil, and what constitutes evil, and how is evil operationalized, how is it defined? And that in itself is kind of a, I've got a bonus talk that I'll put out at the end of the course that you can look, because I find it a fascinating topic and something to explore. So let's think briefly about what we've done. We've discussed competency. What constitutes competency? Competency in what domains? How does that interact with the idea of insanity? Notice insanity is a legal term. It's not a psychological term. We don't use that term in psychology. And what are the consequences? And how does the system evaluate this? That's all I got. So y'all take care.